Welcome to Phoenix Healing Podcast, where mental health is our number one priority, featuring Liamzy Muniz. Enjoy. Hello, my beautiful souls. Welcome to Phoenix Healing Podcast, where mental health is our number one priority, with your host, Liamzy Muniz. So, y'all, welcome to this week's EP. We're on number 5, which I'm so excited. I set a short-term goal that I want to make it to episode 10. So we're halfway there. That's very exciting. This week's episode is going to be on trauma, triggers. More importantly, triggers. Actually, someone suggested this topic, and whoever did, thank you very, very, very much. You are much appreciated. I have it written down, not word for word, but kind of the question that they asked was how to identify triggers and trauma roots, and how to substitute or more so handle negative habits or coping mechanisms that aren't really the greatest for us, right? So that is what we're going to touch topic on. Give my little opinions, my outputs, my own personal experience with triggers, which I actually just got triggered today very deeply, and I would love to touch topic on that as well. But before we begin, of course, we're going to start with some affirmations to ground our energy and our being with each other and the topic. So you can repeat them if you'd like to, or you can just sit and listen. All that I ask is that you believe, okay? Let's get into it. I trust in my ability to handle difficult situations. I know that I'm more than enough. I allow myself to feel my emotions without judgments. I allow myself to feel my emotions without pressure. I allow myself to go with the flow. Everything happens for my greater good. May Spirit give me the strength to change what I can and accept what I cannot. I am strong. I am powerful. I am capable. I am valuable. It is okay to not be okay. I allow myself to feel curious about my emotions. I allow myself to feel curious about me. I love to explore who I am. I love to love. I accept all that I am. Everything that I have to offer is more than enough. A little kissy for you. Okay. So, I'm really, really excited about this topic because sometimes we get triggered so before I get, carried away, what is a trigger, right? Let's start with that. With the basic knowledge of what is a trigger. And the word kind of speaks for itself, right? When we think of a trigger, we think of, well, it's a part of a gun or or some kind of weapon that can fire off, right? But you are the one that can pull the trigger. And someone might pull and you might just fire off. So when it comes to triggers, these emotional triggers, it's a traumatic response to an event or experience of which caused you so much trauma or so much emotional pain, emotional struggle, that now every time you experience something that's common to that, it's going to trigger those same emotions to come back, right? So the way that I like to see it, just to put in simple terms, it's like an experience that recovers a deep memory that causes you a lot of trauma and pain. That is what a trigger is. And so I mentioned that I was just triggered today, and it wasn't that long ago. It was like an hour ago while I was eating. And what happened was I saw this video of this person, of this couple, right? And it was a male and a female, a man and a woman, a king and a queen. And the man was standing behind her and he was like slapping her butt very viciously and like groping her neck and doing all these things. And I'm not in any way judging it, but because it triggered me because of my past experience with men in terms of me feeling like I had to submit to a man. One of my triggers is when a man makes me feel like I'm forced to submit to them. That triggers the hell out of me. Like when I saw that video, it wasn't any judgment towards the partners, right? It was more so I pictured myself in her position. I pictured some man like smacking my body and groping me and making me feel like, oh, like just thinking about it. Hold on. Oh, girl. Just thinking about it, it makes my heart like jump out of my chest because my experience with my body when it comes to my body and being sexualized and objectified and used physically, it triggers me to see when a man treats a body like an object. And if it was my past, I would have been like, oh yeah, like fuck yeah, that's hot, diddy da diddy do. But now, like, I want my body to be treated softly, with kindness, with a body and a consciousness from another person, with kindness and love, right? So me seeing that, it triggered that past pain when it came to my body, feeling like I was an object, feeling like I had to submit to a man's perspectives and a man's, sexual energies, like. And one of my body's responses was I instantly kicked into fight or flight, right? So when we experience triggers, it really, really pushes us into fight or flight really, really quickly. And it's very sudden and it can be very overwhelming. And so some of these signs can be anxiety, so heart palpitations that happen for me. It can be, you get sweaty or you start shaking or you even feel nauseous sometimes. Those can be some signs. Some other signs can be like weakness in the body, or all of a sudden your mind feels foggy, or you feel, or you feel this deep emotion of anger, like you just want to burst out, and when I got triggered, I felt a bit like like I wanted to scream. Like I wanted to scream at the video. I felt my blood boiling. I felt like my heart was beating so quickly because of that fight or flight, right? So that's just an example of a trigger, and one that I just experienced today, So when you feel triggered, don't ever judge yourself in any way, because we experience so much throughout this life, and sometimes we don't realize that some of our experiences were traumatic. Trauma isn't just physical. I know a lot of people who have experienced trauma physically. And so even through my perspective, sometimes I like push myself away from the idea that, oh, I've experienced some kind of trauma, because it wasn't physical, or at least some of them weren't physical, right? But trauma can be represented in different forms. It can be physical, mental, energetic, spiritual, and in any way, shape, or form. It's just an event or an experience that made you feel very overwhelmed with negative emotions, that caused you that traumatic experience, that traumatic feeling. So, because this is a really big topic, I do have some notes here. Don't play with them. So, I am going to mention that there are going to be 4 W's. It's going to be what, why, how, and where. That is how we're going to identify and kind of structure the process of handling triggers and handling your responses. Okay, so keep that in mind. The what, why, how, and where. We're going to start with the what, identifying the trigger. What was the trigger? What is the trigger? And a lot of the times, well, most of the time, the trigger is the feeling that comes up. It's you remembering, and sometimes we don't consciously remember, right? That's why we're going to get there when we get to why. It's identifying the root, like why did I get triggered? But the what is the trigger? What is the trigger? What what did I feel that identifies as a trigger? And as I stated before, it's that overwhelming feeling, and it's very sudden. It's that fight or flight. You can be in the best mood in the world and something triggers you and you won't even know what it is, and all of a sudden you're angry. All of a sudden you feel like running. You feel like punching someone in their fucking face. That was a trigger. And so I have a little list of things here. It's like one of the feelings, the feelings that you feel when you are triggered, they are all internal. So we might look at that person and be like, oh, you did this. And we might feel angry towards them and want to explode towards them. But we need to keep in mind that with emotional triggers, these triggers are already within you. They've been within you this whole time. It's just someone was there to awaken that memory, right? They were there to kind of remind you like, oh yeah, this happened to you, remember? And because it's all subconscious, we don't realize. And so those emotions, they're an internal projection. So it's like with a projector, right? Let's do some visuals. I love visuals. Let's say we have like this projector, right? And there's these different rows of movies constantly playing, but it's not projecting onto the screen. It's just rolling in there, constantly playing. And all it takes is one person to press that button and it's projecting. That's how it works. That's how it works with trauma. It's like it's constantly in our mind. It's in our subconscious mind, but we're not consciously aware of it because it was in the past, right? And this can be childhood. It can be any moment in your life in the past, okay? Keep that in mind. So it's constantly already there. It's playing. It's in motion. And all it takes is one person to press that button and remind you like, oh yeah, that movie is in there. It's in there playing. You remember that memory. So subconsciously, we project everything that we felt in that moment. It's almost like you're time traveling in a sense, right? Emotions, when we feel triggered and past emotions come up, that's a form of time travel, in my opinion, because you're going from being in a present moment and feeling what you're feeling now to then all of a sudden feeling every emotion that you felt in the past in a traumatic event. And so that's really how you can better identify the trigger. It's once you feel those heavy emotions, listen to yourself. Do not run away, because when you get triggered, you're going to go into fight or flight, and it's going to be difficult to understand and to react from a place of consciousness. And so we need to keep in mind, okay, what is my body trying to tell me? What am I feeling, right? So when you're identifying a trigger, if it's so overwhelming that you feel that you can't respond, or you feel that you just want to instantly respond from emotion, that was a trigger and you need to take a step back. As difficult as it may be, trust me, I know. As difficult as it may be to take a step back and take a deep breath, do it, because it is not for you. I mean, it is not for those other people. It is for you, right? And it's not the other people's fault that you felt triggered. It's because these are emotions and trauma that are deeply rooted within you. And no matter who it is, they can trigger it. So it's not the other person's fault. You need to take responsibility for that trigger and care for it. Okay, so that was the first W. It's the what. What is the trigger? Ooh, I'm glad I underlined it so viciously. It is a pattern. Okay, just as I stated, it's like that projection of a past experience. It's going to be a consistent pattern. That is the number one way to really identify a trigger, because it is going to consistently come up every time something happens. So let's say, what's like a good example? I'm gonna just use the one I used earlier of the groping and that aggressiveness on the female body. Let's say I just saw that now, right? And I understood that was because of my past experiences. Now, any time I see that, I'm going to feel exactly what I felt right now. And that is the pattern, right? Every time you feel something, take note of it in your head. And if you feel it again when the same thing happens, take note of it, because that is a big trigger, and that is coming from a very trauma that is coming from the root of trauma. Okay, so that was the first W, is the what. Now let's talk about why did we get triggered? How do we identify the trauma? And I personally feel that this is the most difficult aspect of trauma, of healing. It's identifying, well, where is it coming from? Because we experience so much throughout our lives, sometimes we might get confused, and especially having to remember things. Don't tell me to remember something, because girl, ooh, that's not really gonna work too well for me. But when it comes to remembering trauma, our brain subconsciously and naturally, it's going to protect us from it. So it's not gonna reveal it to us as easily as we would want it to, right? Like when we get triggered from a traumatic experience, when it's an emotional trigger, our body goes into fight or flight because it's protecting us from that memory, right? It's protecting us from that memory, from those emotions that we experience, because we identify that memory as a threat. We identify it as something that can hurt us, as something that can destroy our peace. And so our mind is going to naturally keep us away from it. And we're not going to be able to recover it unless we take some time to actually sit. So some tips that I feel helped me in identifying what the trauma was and where it was rooted to, where these triggers were rooted to, I'd say really take some time to self-evaluate, to do some self-reflection, to do meditations, and to just spend time with yourself. Because if you're constantly around distractions, you're never going to have the space or the time or the energy, to really identify it, right? Because let's say I'm like, oh, like I have this heavy burden on my shoulder, and I'm over there like doing something else with my hands. I'm never gonna take the pressure off of my shoulders because I'm constantly doing other things, and I'm not giving that burden or that heaviness or the trauma any time to actually be seen and understood. So when you're approaching the root of triggers, approach it with curiosity. I like that. Approach it with curiosity. So you're not judging it in any way. You're not pressuring yourself. You're simply saying, you know what? I'm curious as to why I feel this way. Because when I feel this way, it doesn't feel good, right? And I want to be able to better understand how I can help myself. These are things that you should be telling yourself when you're trying to identify what trauma is rooted to certain triggers. So some ways that we can do self-reflection and self-evaluations is through writing. That's something that I like to do. Sometimes when I feel confused, I grab like a whiteboard. Like there's so many different things you can do, but you can grab a whiteboard if you're a visual person and draw things out and draw like pictures and imagery and different symbols that resonate with your thought pattern and ways to memorize certain events. Or you can grab a book, write, how do I feel? You know, with the 4 W's, I'm gonna update you guys on this, but I do want to eventually incorporate this in further things, the 4 W's. So some writing prompts that you can do is, what did I feel? What was my trigger? Identifying the trigger. And then asking yourself, well, why do I think that I feel that? You know, what did this person do or what happened for me to feel that? And then once you identify what was the event or the experience or the action taken towards you that made you feel that triggered, that made you feel those emotions, you can better think back and identify, okay, this has happened to me before. And it's definitely a process. But after you ask yourself, well, what was the root? Ask yourself, how did I respond? How did I respond to this trigger? I don't want to get too far, but I'm just giving you guys some prompts for if you're going to do self-evaluations in writing. And then at the end, after you say, well, how did I respond in terms of like, what did I do? What action did I take after I felt that, you know, with my fight or flight? What did I do with that energy? Ask yourself, in what ways can I use this energy for good things? So just a little sum up of writing prompts, right? I'm going to talk more deeply on it. But yeah, identifying the roots. Meditation works, spending time with your energy so you better understand, well, who am I, right? Because when things trigger us, when these events and trauma outside of us that were in conjunction with conditioning and ways that we were raised, that's apart from who you are, right? That's not your identity. That's something you experience. So spending time with yourself and understanding, well, who am I? What is my energy? Like, how do I view the world? You better understand what is outside of yourself and what isn't you. So that trauma, it isn't you. And you're not going to be able to see that trauma as something outside of yourself if you're constantly distracted or if you're constantly identifying yourself as these emotions, as these experiences. So always keep in mind that you are the observer. You are the storyteller right now. One of the affirmation was one that's really popular prayer. It's, may God give me the strength to change the things that I can and accept the things that I cannot. Right? So it's like, you need to understand that these triggers, that this trauma, these are things that you cannot change. So that's something you have to accept. Now give yourself the space, the courage, the strength, the love, the compassion to change what you can, which is the way that you respond, the way that you view these emotions, the way that you view this trauma, right? And it's a lot easier said than done. Of course, it's a very difficult task to break these constructions that have been placed for us, right? Breaking the conditionings and viewing the world in different ways and trying to love differently. And it's really fucking difficult. It's really difficult. And I'm not saying it so easily because I think it's easy. I'm saying it because sometimes we do need that little reminder, like, hey, I know not everything maybe not everything is going the way you'd planned or expected to in your life, but you have control of what you decide to do moving forward, right? So that's the same thing with trauma and triggers. We cannot change who triggers us or what triggers us or when we are triggered. It's going to be so random. But you have control of, well, how am I going to react? What am I going to do moving forward? How am I going to use this energy? Okay. So that's gonna lead us to the W number 3, which is how. How did you respond to this trigger? So this is when we get into that state of fight or flight after the trigger, right? When we are triggered, sometimes subconsciously we don't know it, we might run to coping mechanisms that are not good for us. For example, drugs, alcohol, sex to cope. These are different things different negative habits that we might use to cope with trauma and triggers. And we might not realize it because when we are under the influence of alcohol or drugs or lust, lustful experiences, it takes you away from the actual emotion, right? So when it comes to triggers, our body is going to naturally, as I stated before, try to protect us from it, right? And so it's going to distract us. It's going to maneuver us into a path where it will distract us from the emotions. And that's how these negative coping mechanisms come up, because we find that comfort in knowing that there is something that is going to, push me away from that experience, push me away from those emotions so that I don't have to feel it anymore. But if you want to heal that trauma, if you want to better understand why you get triggered, you have to be sober. You cannot turn to anything that is going to corrupt your consciousness, that is going to corrupt your self-awareness. Because with this, oh, I just peeped. That's not a W, that's a H. Anyway, when you ask yourself how I responded, you have to take responsibility right? You have to take responsibility in knowing that, okay, maybe every time I feel this way, I go and grab a beer. Every time I feel this way, I go and roll up a blunt, or I go and, distract myself with different things and different people. You have to take responsibility for that, because that is you making your choice. It's not the universe, it's not spirit guiding you. It is you making that choice. The only thing that was out of your control was the trigger. It was the trauma. It was the emotions. It was the interpersonal experience. But you have control as to how am I going to respond. So to help substitute these negative coping mechanisms, you have to first identify them. You can't just say, oh, I want to change my life. I want to be a better person. Well, how can you do that? What are you doing now that you feel isn't good for you? That is you taking responsibility. That is you taking the first step towards growth and change and transformation and evolution, all of these beautiful things. So don't play, okay? So like some of the questions I have here on how do you respond, what do you use to cope, and is it negative? If you identify one of your coping mechanisms as negative, one of your negative habits that you feel is holding you back, it might be really hard to break, but the first step is taking responsibility. Okay? That's all. The first thing to do, just take responsibility that the things that you are doing right now isn't the best for you. Okay? Mwah. I love you. I know it's difficult. And I like having these conversations because they're all conversations that I wish I would have had, man. Like, like I'm still in the process of healing, of course, but there's so much going on, like the past 3-4 years, not only for me, but for the whole world, of course, but a lot of mental restrictions and just a whole lot of things back to back, right? And I sit here and I talk of my experiences and I talk of my perspectives and the things that I've learned because I really want to help, and not to say that I'm like, I know everything because I most definitely do not, but I know some things, right? So I'm sharing that wisdom with you. So I hope, we find the strength and the courage to continuously stand up no matter how many times we fall down, because I know it's fucking difficult and it's shitty and it's all of these things. And we're like, girl, I'm tired. Like I'm young, but my soul is very old. But, sometimes we just got to keep going. It makes it easier knowing that we're not the only ones who are struggling. As shitty as that sounds, it makes it easier to know that we're not the only one that experiences these negative and heavy emotions, right? This is something that we as humans all experience. It's a normal thing, okay? We just need to learn our own methods of understanding it and coping with it and doing what we got to do so that we can heal, okay? I love you. But the last W is where. Where are you putting in this energy? This goes back to how are you responding? So one thing I learned is because everything is energy, it's constantly in a flow. So let's say you have this negative habit of, let's just throw it in there, drinking alcohol, right? Let's say that's your negative habit. And every time you feel overwhelmed, every time you feel stressed, that's what you indulge in. That is you investing your energy into that thing. You're investing your energy into that habit. So if you want to break that habit, first identify what the habit is, which we spoke of as taking responsibility. And then you need to take that energy and invest it into something else, because that same energy is still ever flowing. You can't just stop a habit and just, that's it, walk away and be like, okay, I'm done, like live a happy life. You have to invest that energy into something else, just something that's more positive. So for me, one of my negative habits is when I felt overwhelmed or when I felt like I couldn't do something, right? When I was limiting and restricting myself, the first thing I'd do was grab my phone. I'd scroll and like see everyone else being successful and happy. And that was one of my negative habits because it was limiting me from my own personal experience and growth. And so what I did to counteract that, what I did to take my energy and invest it in, was I started reading more, right? I started doing things that are more proactive for me. We view, energy investment as something that might be productive, which to me, I don't like the word productive because it enforces that conditioning that constantly doing something is success, which is not. I use the word proactive because proactive is you taking a conscious, active move towards something in a much positive form. You see, proactive, a positive action. And so we might view certain things as being productive and being good for us. And you know what? I don't need to worry about my emotions because I have to do this and do this and do that. No. When you are proactive, when you take responsibility for the fact that you are trying to distract yourself from your emotions, don't play. I see you trying to distract yourself from your emotions. we take that conscious step towards responsibility, realization, self-awareness, growth, and understanding and understanding of where our energy is and why we might feel drained after. Ooh, that's a good thing to bring up, is when we invest our energy into a habit or an activity or just something that's negative for us, we're going to feel drained after. Even if it's like not in the moment, but after that activity is over, you're going to feel drained because that energy was invested into something that is not giving back to you. And so you have to take that energy. Once you identify the habit, take it and use it for something else. It can be reading, it can be drawing, doing more creative and expressive art forms. It's all just a form of expression, really. So for you to harness that energy, and use it for good things, for your own growth and your healing, invest it into expressive forms that are positive, that are authentic and organic, so that you're gaining something back from it. That's an equal exchange of energy between you, that habit, that is proactivity, right? So that's the W, the where. Where am I investing my energy? So it all really goes in line. I wanted to break it up this way because it makes it a lot easier in terms of identifying the trigger, identifying the root, identifying how you react and what you're giving your energy to. When you react, what are you doing? Because reacting, it's not just you arguing back or talking back. Reacting could be you running away. I did want to bring this up is and sometimes when I used to feel my triggers, I used to flight. That fight or flight were coming and I would fly the fuck out that bitch. Like I would feel so overwhelmed, and I'm someone who doesn't like chaos. I don't really like confrontations. And so whenever I felt those emotions, I would run away because I didn't want to deal with them. I didn't want to feel them. I didn't want to have to accept, right? I didn't want to have to take responsibility. And so I'd take flight. And that was me investing that energy in running away instead of sitting down and harnessing that energy to understand. And so, yeah. I feel like this was such a wholesome and proactive conversation. Ooh, y'all, I done almost flung my whole ear off, but yeah, I'm whoever suggested this question, you're incredible. You're amazing. Thank you so much. And I hope you guys feel comfortable enough to stay connected with me and communicate with me. I know it's a little harder to communicate with you guys because it's only one person speaking right now. But I do want to eventually, organize something so that I can actually speak to you guys in person or through the camera or through the microphone, whatever, so that we can have one-on-one conversations. But for now, this is what we get in right now. But yeah, you guys can still suggest topics. You can give me your perspectives and your opinions. I love, love, love to hear different perspectives. And even if it's the same perspective, like, I love to hear just what you think, right? It's that's part of community when we're healing, when we're growing simultaneously and we're helping each other. It's not just me speaking to you, we are talking to each other, right? I'm energetically giving energy and I'm receiving some back because I feel very fulfilled right now being able to sit down and be in this state of consciousness where I'm like, damn, like I really did experience a lot of these different traumatic experiences, and because so much of it was so mental, like ugh, like mentally overwhelming and restricting, that's really my focus on a lot of things. I I try to set the intention with everything that I do that it's going to help in some way, shape, or form, because everyone's different, right? Everyone takes information and uses it differently. So I don't try to force the outcome, but I set the intention like, hey, I want to help someone. That's it. I want to advocate mental health awareness. I want to advocate your voice and the fact that you are enough and that you have a choice. And yes, life is difficult. It is very difficult, but you don't, depending on how you react, is if you make it more difficult or if you make it easier for yourself. And when I say make it easier, is allowing yourself to go with the flow, not going against the grain, not going against the wave, causing more turbulence. It's you allowing yourself to take different moments and hold space for yourself to simply be, to sit and breathe if you need to, right? That is you making life easier. When times are overwhelming, when times feel like I can't do this no more, like the fuck, just take some time for yourself. You don't have to constantly be moving. That's that word, productivity. It's so toxic in this society. You're like, oh, you have to be productive. You have to work hard. Like, yeah, if you want to live a good and fulfilling life, you have to put in that action. You have to put in that energy. But working hard is not productivity. Working hard is being proactive. It's being conscious and aware that every decision I make in this life is going to affect me either negatively or positively. So that's when our choices come in, that free will comes in. Well, how do I want to affect myself? And sometimes we don't realize the way that we affect ourselves because of trauma and conditioning and past experience and all of these things. So take that time to understand who you are. Take that time to understand, what do I need? Why do I do the things that I do? What am I investing my energy into? Because what you invest your energy into, that's exactly where you're going to get right back. You're going to get right back. That's like the law of attraction, the law of karma. Karma is just, in reality, the law of attraction. What you give is what you give right back. What goes around comes around like a hula hoop. So just holding that awareness for yourself, right? So when we get triggered and when we feel these heavy emotions, do not just judge yourself off the back, and try your hardest not to project those emotions onto anyone, because it's not the people's fault. We're all just here living, doing what we feel is best for us. And sometimes what we feel is best isn't actually what's best, but it's just that state of mind that we're in, right? So do not blame anyone around you, anyone outside of you, for the way that you react or the way that you feel. Okay, babe? Take responsibility. Take responsibility, even if, someone physically does something to you. Yes, it's okay for you to be angry. It's okay for you to feel those emotions. You are entitled to that. But that idea that we want to get payback, right? The idea of payback, that's you investing the energy into doing exactly what that person did. That person invested their energy in hurting you or using you or mistreating you or whatever. And you're going to do the exact same thing. So you're both going to receive the same karma, because you're both giving that energy with that intention to hurt, with that intention to be negative towards someone. So that's what's going to come back to you, and you don't deserve that. You don't deserve that. So take responsibility and realize that, hey, I accept that I did not have control over my experiences or what happened to me, right? You do not have control of that. But I take responsibility and I allow myself the space to be conscious and aware that I have control over what I decide to do with those experiences, what I decide to do with those emotions, and what I gain from it. Even if you feel like you gain something negative from it, take some time to understand. That's all. Take some time to understand. You know, it's really not easy, and it feels so terrible, but it's allowing yourself the space to just take your time, be patient. Okay, sometimes resting is being proactive because you're taking a very positive approach towards your life. You know, be self-aware. Take responsibility. Do what you do for you. Okay? And if you don't know what you need right now, take the space to understand what you need right now. Okay? Ask yourself questions. Ask yourself why. That's like my favorite question. Why? Always the number one question is why. Why did that person trigger me? Why did I respond that way? Why did I even have that trigger in the first place? You know, why do I feel these emotions? Why do I indulge in these habits? Why am I constantly around people, places, and things who are not benefiting me? Why do I feel drained right now? These are questions that you can ask yourself. You just have to give yourself the space to be curious. It's okay to be curious. You just have to guide that curiosity. Allow your inner child that inner essence to be curious and ask questions. Because when younger kids, they's a damn, oh my God, the way they ask, what is this? What does that do? Why do you have that? Why? You know, be that energy, embody that energy. Always ask why. Why did I allow this person to treat me this way? You know, like, yeah, that person may have acted a way, but it's the same process internally, the same as you. That person is also in the process of understanding themselves, and they also have trauma, and they have triggers, and they have experiences that they project onto you, and that's why they treated you that way. So you have no control over that whole process that's happening within them, but you have control over your internal process. Why did I allow myself to be in this space with a person who constantly hurts me? Right? That is you taking responsibility. That's you not projecting onto them, but instead going internally and trying to understand what's going on. Yeah, this is a whole new world. Like, a whole new world. But yeah, just be easy on yourself, okay? Have patience. You are amazing. You are capable. And if you ever need some help, there are people around you. You just have to be open to opening up, you know. When we allow ourselves to be vulnerable, I'm not saying be vulnerable around everyone, because there are certain people who take advantage of your vulnerability, right? So that's you taking responsibility. Where am I allowing myself to be vulnerable, right? Who am I allowing in my space? Okay, just know that you got this. It's not easy, but you make it look like a damn, you make it look flawless. Don't play. But I love you so, so much. This brings us to the end of the episode. I really hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. Like, I love having these kind of topics that can resonate with every single human being, because we all have triggers and we all have trauma and we all have conditionings, right? That's something we all have in common. So let's talk about it. Let's connect through it. Okay. I love you. I will see you next week. And remember to stay in touch with me. All of my socials are in my link tree. It should be in the link in the bio. If not, oh no, girl. Like, if not, just contact me directly and we can chat, we can connect. Okay. I love you so, so much. And I hope you have a fantastic morning, day, evening, night, whatever may be for you, my beautiful, beautiful soul. I love you. Peace.